takes about another second to go live.
Okay.
All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Geographic, and I will be your host for today. Now, we're really excited to have so many people joining us live today. So normally we'd be streaming these events live in the classrooms all across North America. But of course, with the coronavirus and all the other changes happening right now with the school closures, we are beaming these events live into homes with parents and students all across North America. So we couldn't be more excited. This is our first go, and we have dozens of events with scientists and explorers from all over the world that we'll be sharing with classrooms they can take part in over the next 3 weeks or more. So really excited to be jumping into another Heart in the Ice event. So Hilde Strom and Sunniva Sorby, they have been in Svalbard for over 200 days now, living in a remote trapper's cabin called Bamsebu. So in total, they're going to spend 9 months there, becoming the first women to do so, overwintering on their own. And all along the way, they've been taking part in different citizen science projects for all kinds of amazing organizations like NASA and the Scripps Ocean Institute. And each month we've been connecting with them, talking about different themes and beaming in different experts from different parts of the world. And I've got a little video clip that I'm going to play here that they sent to us from Bamsebu. So give me a second to share this little video clip. There we go. And I'm going to play it now.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, everybody. We are at Svalbard just now, 78 degrees north.
And we are living in really, really strange times right now with the coronavirus, where we're all needing to self-isolate. We're thinking of you.
And we've been here now for 7 months.
In our own self-imposed isolation. And we want to explore by the seat of your pants. We all need to be connected now.
It's a lot to learn, and it's a lot of fun. And this is Hi from Svalbard. See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, I'm going to come back from that screen share. So we have Hilde and Sunniva joining us live via satellite phone because we can't get a video connection from so far north. So Hilde and Sunniva, how are you doing today?
We are doing great, thanks. It's a record cold day for us outside, but we are feeling very grateful that we have enough food. It looks like we're going to have to stay here a little longer than planned. But that's nothing compared to all the change that everybody else is experiencing out there. So can you still hear me, Joe? Super great that everybody is joining on the call today, because you're making the very best of this situation to keep everybody engaged this way. So.
All right. Well, Sunniva, I should give you a little shout out. Happy birthday. I know it's your birthday. I hope you're having a good one up in the cold north. All right. Well, why don't you tell us?
Thank you. I am.
Awesome. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourselves and what you've been up to?
Yep. We have, as Joe said, we're doing a lot of citizen science up here. We started this project to really do what we're doing right now, which is engaging people in the conversation. Today's topic is really
Okay, so we may have just lost them. The satellite connection, unfortunately, so far north can be a little bit unreliable. So if that happens, they're going to call me back via sat phone on their phone. So we'll probably have them back in the next 30 seconds. But I'm just going to give the people joining live from home a little breakdown of how the rest of this call is going to go. So we are lucky. I'm going to introduce Jim Kozmik shortly, and he is an underwater filmmaker. He's been traveling around the world for decades, taking amazing pictures and videos and bringing them back to the public. So he's going to talk a little bit about some of the work he does and some of the work he's done in the Arctic, especially around our changing climate and biodiversity. And then as well, I can see we've got a large group starting to tune in live via YouTube. Use that chat sidebar, introduce yourselves, tell us where you're from, and of course, send us in some questions, because we're going to work those into the live event. So I'm going to give Hilde and Sunniva about 30 more seconds to get back with us on the satellite phone. If that doesn't work out, I'm going to introduce Jim, who's sitting by and ready to go and share some of his amazing experiences with us. We've also got Jim's daughter, Corey, joining us, who's a scientist, and she is going to be able to answer some of our questions live today as well. So about 30 seconds, and then we're going to throw things to Jim if they're not able to reestablish their satellite connection right away. But either way, we'll talk to Hilde and Sunniva at some point during this call. Oh, here we go. All right, Hilde and Sunniva, we have you back.
Yes, sorry about that. These satellites are very, very fast up there. So I'll just continue if that's okay.
Absolutely. So I've got you over the speaker now that you've switched, and just nice and loud for us.
Okay, fantastic. So we are up here for 9 months collecting data for researchers that are studying climate change. And Hilde and I have had over 20 years each of experience exploring our natural world. And we're at a very, very important time right now. And I want to shout out to Jim Kozmik. Thank you so much for joining the call for today's topic, a very important one. We're actually the first generation right now that has a very clear picture of the value of nature and the enormous impact that we have on it. We may also, according to this World Wildlife Fund report called The Living Planet, we may also be the last generation that can act to reverse the trend that we're experiencing right now. So we feel that what we're doing here at Bamsebu for 9 months is very critical to further the understanding that scientists have, and we're wanting to share out stories on how important everybody's voice is in this conversation and how vital it is for everyone to stay curious and engaged. I'm going to pass you to Hilde right now just to share a couple of things, so stand by.
Yeah, hi everyone. So first of all, I'm not quite sure if you know how far we are up to close to the North Pole. We are on 78 degrees north, and today it's 31 minus, as Sunniva said. It's icy cold, and we've had, so far, 20 polar bears around the hut here. We've just come to the polar night, which is 90 days of total darkness. But now the sun is shining, and soon it's going to be midnight sun here up in the Arctic. So what we have seen, and we are so remote, we are 140 kilometers away from the next neighbor. And our neighbors are reindeers and polar bears. So regarding polar bears and the biodiversity, we have seen now the last 10, 15 years in the high Arctic that we are having less and less sea ice. And the sea ice is extremely important for all the food in the sea, but it's also important for our neighbors, the polar bears, because they usually eat seals that lay on the top on the ice. And when they can't get any normal food resource, the seals, they start to try to find food on land. So we have now experienced that the polar bears are actually hunting reindeers. So things are changing. Maybe the polar bear are trying to adapting, but I'm sure that our expert will tell you a lot more about all this that's going on. So as you know, said, stay curious and engage yourself in a project that you would like, and it's really a lot of fun.
All right, perfect. Well, speaking of our expert, we're going to throw things over to Jim. So just a quick little introduction. Jim Kozmik has spent decades traveling the world and diving with countless marine creatures. He's an international award-winning underwater still photographer, filmmaker, and journalist. He's been a part of over 260 motion pictures, commercials, documentaries, underwater television series over the last 30 years, worked with all kinds of amazing organizations like National Geographic and the Discovery Channel. So Jim, it's so great to have you joining us live today.
Yes, hi Joe, thanks for that great introduction. Hello ladies up there in the north. Hopefully you got good Netflix. And keep those polar bears outside. So this is great on a day like today. I hope you girls are staying nice and warm up there. I'm going to basically talk about what we've done, some of the adventures up in the Arctic and how it relates to your research and your information you're passing on to students and people. It all relates, and especially we all share the Arctic. So it's a big deal for everybody. So we're going to start our presentation, and I'll try not to bore you too much and give you some ideas. Lorna and my wife and Corey, my daughter, are beside me here, clued in, and I want to thank them for helping me put together the presentation. They're the electronic geniuses, not me.
Yeah, let me just get this set up here.
Yep.
Okay, and hang on, I gotta do. Oop. Come on, why is it not working? Hang on. New share. Okay.
And then you
So, yeah,
should
we're
have to
just
hit
setting this up.
Trying to get this going here. Hang on.
That's okay.
Okay, and share. This is all fun, kind of new to us.
That's okay. So it's sharing right now. If you just hit play from the beginning, that it should go nice and full screen for us.
Well, I want to get our notes, you know? Can I just, and then Alt-5. There we go. Okay, hang on. I got to move all you guys over here.
Yeah.
All right, looks good on our end. We see a nice, cool, full screen Arctic adventure.
Wow, it's so much easier underwater than playing with these electronics. So let's begin the Arctic adventures that I've had a few of them. People don't realize that the word Arctic is actually a Greek word, Arctos, and it was developed from Northern Hemisphere constellations. So they adapted it to the Northern country. Now, my name is Jim Kozmik, and the presentation today is on the Arctic adventures, the biodiversity, the connectivity, and the effect of climate change. A bit about myself. I have raised 2 children to respect the oceans, wildlife, and to be proactive in saving our world. What you see in the pictures is my wife, Lorna, and Corey, who is now a species at risk biologist and environmental manager, and Tila, who is a music teacher. So it shows you a couple of shots. The ocean is my cathedral. It's my passion. I've been diving for 52 years. I started when I was 13 years old, worked on the drilling rigs from 17 to 20, and started filming underwater in 1970. So with over 5,000 dives in 30 countries, the ocean has changed a lot over the years. So what the ocean means to me now is a big thing. And the idea that over the years, we've done a lot of shows underwater. I was very fortunate to be part of the staff, production staff, and cameramen for 4 underwater television series across the world based out of Canada. Sport Diver, Undersea Explorer, The Blue Round, Mysteries of the Deep. And I worked on numerous projects for National Geographic, the BBC, Animal Planet, lots of feature films and commercials, and had a lot of fun. And I'm also affiliated as a fellow with the Canadian Explorers Club, the Canadian chapter, and the Royal Canadian Geographic Society, where I met Joe. Now let's talk a little bit about the Arctic itself. The average yearly temperature in the Arctic is usually about 0. It does get a lot colder, of course. Look at the bottom of the Earth. The average temperature in Antarctica goes down sometimes below minus 58 degrees. The top of the world is the Arctic, and the bottom of the world is the Antarctic. Polar bears live in the Arctic, and they just love eating seals. Believe it or not, there are no polar bears at the bottom in Antarctica. There also are no penguins that live in the Arctic, but there's lots of penguins that live in Antarctica. So we share in the Arctic Circle with 8 countries that border the Arctic and the North Pole. And the North Pole seems to be moving all the time now. Canada has one of the longest shorelines, and Denmark, Russia, United States, Iceland, Sweden, and Norway, and of course the USA, all have a piece of the Arctic. The Arctic is home to many indigenous communities. Communities rely on the land to maintain traditional ways of life. These communities have been stewards of the land for many, many years. Their knowledge systems play a vital role in managing a healthy environment, stable ecosystem, and in the fight against climate change. So who lives in this Arctic Circle? Does that cabin look familiar at all? That's where our two ladies of the North are right now. Looks very cozy. I hope you're staying warm. Cities are up there, towns are up there, lots of researchers, explorers. With all the 8 countries that surround that area, the circle, there are 4 million people that live there. So let's talk about a little about the biodiversity of the Arctic. And what is biodiversity? It simply means a variety of life living in a specific area or zone. So let's have a look at the basic animals on top. We all know these animals from textbooks. On the next slide, what you're going to see is more diverse area of what's under and around the ice shelf. Biodiversity on the sea ice. The Arctic itself is partially covered by ice in the summer, completely covered by ice in the winter, which is becoming less and less expansive since 1980. The Arctic may become ice-free for the first time in human history by 2040. That's only 20 years from now. Think about it. If you're only 13 years old now, you'll be 33 years old when this happens. And it shows you some of the animals and where they live in the zones. The polar sea ice is frozen saltwater. The icebergs you see in pictures are actually freshwater, very old but fresh from glaciers. The ocean depth of the Arctic averages around 1,000 meters, and it is the smallest ocean of all the oceans. It covers about 4% of the Earth. There is more under the ice than you can imagine, and this chart shows you the various layers of habitat. With this in mind, let's talk a little bit more about the diversity of the area. Walruses, which are unique to the Arctic itself. These mammoth creatures can dive down 30 to 40 meters into the ocean depths to eat clams, sea cucumbers, mussels, crustaceans that of course are found on the bottom of the sea. They are also known to eat seals and sometimes narwhals. In the Arctic as well, and surrounding areas, we have 6 variety of seals. Now seals feed in open water and under the ice for fish, and at the sea bottom for crustaceans. The average seal can be up to 3 meters long, weigh as much as 400 kilograms. Seals are basically big old dogs of the sea. They are playful, they're curious. I've had some great interactions with them in my adventures. While filming, we've encountered them playful habits. They would come down, bite our fins, bite our heads. I've got torn suits from it just to get our attention. And you imagine, this is a big animal. I have a video for you, but had technical problems inserting it. So Joe will be able to insert it on YouTube link later after the presentation if you desire to look at it. Now, of course, we have the visiting whales, the gray, the bowhead, the humpback. They all eat krill, crustaceans, zooplankton, and small schooling fish. The narwhal, that's the funny one with the big tooth in the head, and the beluga eat schooling fish, but they are on the polar bears and walruses menus. Basically, all animals follow the same food chain. As the climate changes, it creates a ripple effect, and the animals must adapt or die. So, what is climate change and global warming? Since the early 20th century, there has been a steady increase in surface temperature on this planet. Since 1880, Earth's surface temperature has increased by almost 2 degrees. including the warming of the oceans, the land, and the atmosphere. Think about it. Our climate is accumulating 4 Hiroshima atomic bomb worth of heat every second. It's over 2,800,000 atomic bombs since 1998. Bang! That's a lot. What about climate change? Heat from fossil fuel emissions trap gases within the Earth's atmosphere. This creates a greenhouse effect and Earth's response. Let's start at the bottom of the ocean and the surface area, where I'm most familiar with. From my experience, the ocean response can be seen with the bleaching and dying of corals, the increasing and killing algae, affecting fish and bird populations. The rise in sea level can be seen in Venice, Italy. It looks like it is sinking with the water rise. Coastal inhabitants having to move further inland away from the rising sea line and the water line. Flooding in areas that have never been flooded: Egypt, Israel, Italy, France, Indonesia, etc. We have all seen how severe the hurricanes and tornadoes have become. A lot of artifacts have been found due to the permafrost melting. Animals don't have the luxury of air conditioning or grocery stores. They rely on the environment for survival. We should be panicking about climate change the way the world is panicking about the coronavirus right now. There is not enough toilet paper in this world to save us from climate change. And as usual, at the start of every disaster movie, there is a scientist being ignored, like The Day After Tomorrow. So connectivity, what is it? Land characteristics that allow animals to move easily between habitats. Why is this important? It provides travel routes for hunting, foraging, protection, and safe passage as animals move around the land during each season. Habit fragmentation, a loss of connectivity between habitats. This is really bad, sometimes irreversible. What about the loss of connectivity? This reduces foraging and hunting areas, forces animals to swim long distances to migrate or search for food and habitat, reduces habitat availability for prey items so they are running out of food in areas they can easily reach. The food leaves, the animals have to travel, swim further to forage to the point of exhaustion. People can move away, but not the wildlife. If wildlife fail, the system fails, and we're all connected to the system. You can see that the polar bears are thinner and having fewer babies now. So look at this poor, thin polar bear on the last of the floating icebergs, surrounded by plastic pollution. Do we want that? Climate change is a huge risk to the Arctic and all of its inhabitants. Human impacts, pollution, introduction of invasive species, offshore oil drilling, industrial fishing. Climate change, meaning melting of ice masses, sea levels rising, loss of inhabitant for species, loss of connectivity between habitats, changes in habitats. It's not just the animals, it's the indigenous communities are losing their hunting grounds and traditional ways of life. Now, I'm going to show you a quick little sequence I filmed a few years ago. This isn't on a movie set. This is up on the real ice, the far north Arctic Circle, under real conditions. I filmed this for the BBC for a series called The First Canadians. It was shot in the Arctic, I don't know, 10 or 12 years ago now. It demonstrates how the ice is thinning now. It took us 10 days to shoot this, and I'm actually under 7 feet of ice to film this sequence. It's very, very dangerous and difficult to film this sequence, but it shows you the way it used to be years ago. So how can you help your planet? There is no planet B. We are it. This is Mother Earth. Explore your world, protect our oceans, protect our future, record, and maybe add some observations. Learn about what's going on out there. Think globally, act locally where you live. How can you help the Arctic and our Earth? Be mindful of your waste. What about those plastic bottles? Reduce your need for single-use plastic straws, garbage bags. Find creative ways of reusing materials in your home before throwing them out. Dishes, plastic bowls, things like that for growing plants. Educate your friends and family on sustainability and the threats to the earth. Be mindful of your energy consumption, the heat, the light in your house. How do you warm things? Conserve. Again, at the start of every disaster movie, there's a scientist being ignored. Listen to our scientists. We need science now more than ever. They have dedicated their lives to studying our world so they can help us save it. Be part of the change for tomorrow. Keep using our science brains to consider our impacts to this earth. And don't be fooled by what they say on social media to deny climate change. Don't be that guy. Reconnect yourself with the earth. Go outside. Take your shoes off, maybe. Spend some time with the lakes, the oceans, the ponds, the rivers, and the oceans. Remember, this is what created us. We have a responsibility to this force who gave us life. Build a relationship with your earth. In some native languages, the term for plants translates to those who take care of us. Be the change. You are the future. Thanks.
All right.
Okay,
Perfect, Jim. Thank you so much,
questions?
for sharing. If you want to hit the stop screen share at the top, there we go. We've got you back. So now what we're going to do is we're going to start taking a few questions from YouTube. So I can see we've got a big group of students tuning in live on YouTube. Don't forget to let us know where you're watching from and send in some of those questions. You can ask Jim and Corey questions about biodiversity. You can ask Jim about his diving around the world. And then we can ask Hilde and Sunniva, who are still here with me, switched over onto the satellite phone, and you can ask them questions about the citizen science projects they've been working on, life living in the trapper's cabin in Svalbard, all kinds of questions like that. Now, let's take the first questions to start, and then I'm going to share that little sea lion video because I think that could be something that would be a great option to share as well. But here we go. Let's start here. We've got one question coming in from online. This is from Krish, and they're wondering, Jim, what inspired you to start scuba diving?
Well, I lived up in Lake Simcoe in Ontario, and when I was 12 years old, I saw divers coming out of the water one day when I was fishing. It was just so fascinating. Started watching Mike Nelson on Sea Hunt on TV, Jack Cousteau. Got every book, everything I could read. Forced my parents to send me down to Toronto on a bus every Thursday to take a scuba course. I became the youngest diving instructor in Canada at 16 years old. One of the youngest commercial divers certified as well in Canada. It just became my passion. And I've surrounded my life in the water world.
All right. And I think that's such a good point, Jim, is, you should follow your passion. Students out there tuning in today, if there's something you love, learn more about it, be curious, get involved, because if you can turn your passion into your career, I think there's no better way to spend your life than doing something like that. All right, let's jump back to that YouTube channel and let's grab another question here. So we've got a question here for Hilde and Sunniva, and we have a group here that's wondering about what made you decide to overwinter in Svalbard. Hilde and Sunniva, can you still hear me? All right, so looks like we lost the satellite connection. So Jim, we're going to come back with another question for you. We've got Gibson here, and they're wondering about the warmest water you've ever been diving in, And they're also wondering, have you made any big discoveries while diving?
Well, I've done a lot of diving in the South Pacific, and I have to say around Truk Lagoon, where all the Japanese warships are sank, we've done 7 weeks with the Japanese warships near Truk Lagoon in that area near Guam. And the water there was 89 degrees from top to bottom. And it was just absolutely amazing. And we filmed 4 television documentaries on the World War II shipwrecks, planes, submarines, destroyers, cargo ships, tanks, bombs, you name it. Really, really interesting in this totally primitive area of the world. It took us like 5 airplanes to get there as well from Toronto.
All right. So I've got Hilde and Sunniva back. Hilde and Sunniva, can you hear me on the satellite phone?
Yep, loud and clear.
All right. So we've got a great question here from online, and they're wondering what inspired you to make this decision to overwinter in Svalbard? Okay. I don't think we're going to have much luck with the satellite connection, but they're going to keep trying. While we wait, Jim, we've got another good one. This could maybe be for Corey as well. We've got a group who's wondering about reducing carbon footprint. So they're wondering about some things that you've done maybe in your travel or in your everyday life. This is Nicholas Terry is wondering, what have you done to reduce your footprint while traveling and your overall plastic consumption?
I think that's one for you, Corey.
Okay, that's a great question. There's always a lot of wonderful ways to be more sustainable in your home. I currently live about 4 hours north of Toronto, whereas they live just out East End. So when I'm up here, we have a lot more sustainable initiatives, like I'm constantly reusing plastic items to start all my seeds for the year, and also growing plants in. I repurpose almost everything I can find as to the best of my ability. And they also do that a lot at the farm, even down to things like reusing things like cloths instead of using napkins at the dinner table. Little things like that can actually make a huge difference long term. So it's really just taking a step back in your own home, looking around and just thinking, how can I use what I already have? And how can I reuse things as many times as possible before needing to throw them out? For example, an old teapot makes a fantastic planter, and plants give us oxygen, and they're just a pleasure to be around. So there's tons and tons of options to be more sustainable and just be more mindful of things like energy consumption, and ask yourself, do I need this or do I want it? And what's the impact that I'm actually going to have on the earth when I make this decision?
All right. Awesome, Corey. So I've got Hilde and Sunniva back again. So Hilde and Sunniva, we're just talking about, okay. Sorry, not working with the technology. So technology is pretty amazing. We do live events with scientists and explorers all over the world. But once you get north and into the Arctic Circle, you start to lose the ability to do the video calls. And then the satellite technology for phone calls can be pretty hit and miss as well. So let's grab another question from online. Oh, I like this one. So Sophia's wondering, Jim and family, do you ever go diving with your family? And how often do you get into the water nowadays?
Well, Corey, you answer that one.
Okay. Well, Dad's kind of considered like the Yoda of the sea. So everywhere that we go, people are looking to him for questions. So it makes dive trips kind of humorous in that he always has much more experience than the people who are initially supervising us on the dive trips. So it always ends up them asking him questions. But it's really fun because we can dive in groups and always be comfortable and confident and having a great time, knowing Dad is just floating around in the back, watching over us all. And it's a great opportunity for endless learning. And he has a solution and answer to every possible question you could ever imagine with regards to diving. And yeah, so it's always a great time diving with him. And we recently went to Cozumel last February, and it was a really great time. He has a lot more insights under the water, and he knows a lot of more things to look for. So instead of just kind of doing the casual float along with the rest of the group, he'd stop you and be like, look over here. Yeah. So I got to spend some time. I'm primarily a reptile biologist. I work a lot with turtles. So he would point out all the hidden turtles, and we'd spend some additional time with them underwater. So it's really quite a fantastic opportunity getting to dive with my dad. I feel very spoiled with regards to that.
All right, pretty darn lucky. Sounds like you've been to some amazing places. We've got Hilde and Sunniva back on the satellite phone, and they're going to talk a little bit about why they've chosen to overwinter in Svalbard. So we're ready.
Okay, the short answer to that question is we protect what we love. And both Hilde and I have decades of experience in the natural world, Arctic and Antarctic, and we've seen lots of changes in both places. We also are very fortunate to have close friendships with international scientists, and we've learned a lot about climate changes around the world from them. And we both felt a very, very deep intrinsic need to stay relevant and to make some small difference to protect the very resources and natural world that has so generously shaped our experiences and who we are as passionate, curious polar ambassadors and female leaders. So it was a natural thing for us to overwinter up here. It's also been to overwinter in a trapper's cabin. She's been living in Svalbard for 24, 25 years. And so we started Hearts in the Ice when we met over 3 years ago as a platform for dialogue around this issue, because we're at a time, it's like the tipping point right now. So it felt like a natural thing for the two of us that are switched on, calling ourselves climate care ambassadors, and we love working with kids. I think that for all the kids that are on the phone right now, your voices are so important at this time. Speak up loud and clear, get engaged, stay curious, and we're up here just shining a light on all the things that are happening, but in a positive way, because it's sort of like everything else that's happening. It can be kind of paralyzing and depressing, and we're wanting to sort of ignite some fuel around this in an inspiring, positive way. So it's sort of like us doing what you said earlier, Joe. We're so fortunate, like Jim, we're able to make a sort of, our living right now is doing what we're doing, this work around citizen science.
All right. Well, Hilde and Sunniva, while we still have a good connection, let's get one more question in. And since, biodiversity is what we're talking about, can you tell us a little bit about some of the polar bear encounters you've had around the cabin?
Absolutely. And I'm going to pass you over to Hilde for that because it's been pretty dynamic here with polar bears.
Yeah, well, it's natural habitat for the polar bear. It's around our hut, so we are sort of the visitors, and they are those that belongs here. So we have tried to adapt their pattern and not come in their way, but they have come to our huts quite a lot during this winter, and it has been some challenging episodes, especially in the darkness. Just outside our hut here, we had a big polar bear. Around, scientists think it was around 600 kilo. Fortunately, that's kind of a quiet and maybe a little scared polar bear. He keeps his distance, but he came all the way up to our doorstep and scared Etra, our dog, and us. She barked, and we ran out, and off he went. So, and also we've had several polar bears around our huts, scaring both Etra and us, but we have kept our food solid, packed away, so no food has been available for it, and so it has not been any big interest for the polar bear to stay around the hut. But we have seen them in the area, and we've had them. So just 11 days ago, and the past 5 days before that, we had 10 polar bears around our hut. So now it has been quiet for 11 days.
All right. And Jean is wondering if there's been any cubs, any polar bear cubs.
Oh, absolutely. And we have a polar bear mom here with 2 grown-up cubs, and they are solid and look very healthy and fat. And so they are in the area. They keep breeding and keep coming back with new cubs every 2 or 3 years. So imagine it's actually it's difficult to understand how.
Okay, I think we may have just lost the connection, but that's okay. We got a few good questions in there while we were connected. So we're going to go back to Corey and Jim. And I think this is a really good question. This is from Zoe. And Zoe's wondering, is there a specific moment that you saw the effect of climate change on an ecosystem or on biodiversity? Can you think of a moment where it really hit you and you saw an impact?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that's ever hit Lorna and I, we were on a expedition 150 miles off the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. And you figure that far offshore, everything would be pristine, no garbage, no nothing. We get on the reefs and there's 10 inches of seaweed, grassy algae growing right on top of the reef. And we had to move a few times to film the clean stuff. We were there working with the tourist board to help them along as well. So the idea is to show clean, perfect, healthy coral and good population of fish. So I was back twice to the Great Barrier Reef, and sporadic areas of algae growth and some of the coral bleaching white. I was really kind of disturbed at what had happened at the temperature warming, and the water was warmer. So that's definitely something that's really made a mark on me over the years.
I suppose I can speak to more terrestrial side of that. So as I mentioned before, I'm a reptile biologist and an environmental management biologist. So I spend a lot of time with my team doing research on the land and monitoring a lot of different parts of the systems. About 2 years ago, basically all of Ontario was on fire, and that's because we had such a massive drought season. And while forest fires are a natural cleanse that happens across time, but because of human suppression and these very volatile fluctuations and change that we're seeing now, it's really hard for them to manage that natural process. So basically from our end, what we saw was a fire that burned almost from, I don't know, August until October, and it wiped out over 16,000 hectares of land. And that includes things like peatlands and wetlands. And when we're talking about the drought season, and when we're talking about things like reptiles and looking at that systems approach, is we're talking about animals that are very long-lived and they're not very adaptable. And so they depend on wetlands, which actually maintain the function of the rest of the system, and they maintain the function of the wetlands. When our wetlands are completely drying up in a season, that's very limiting for their habitat availability and also the natural swing of things. But when we incorporate these massive fires on top of that, these wetlands are no longer resilient to that kind of change. And so what we saw a lot of the time were things like peatlands and bogs that took thousands and thousands of years to develop, burning straight down to the bottom. And once we lose those types of systems, we can't just replace those. Those are irreplaceable functioning parts of the system. And they are so valuable because they do things like hold carbon. They act like floodplains for when we get the extra wet seasons, like last year, to absorb all that extra water and then place it back into the system, to which they filter it, including all the pollutants that go back out into our systems. So essentially, we depend on those systems, and they're so vulnerable to these changes. But what's worse is the individuals that live in these systems are not adaptable to this kind of change. So I see this almost on a yearly basis, very, very volatile changes as a response to climate change.
All right, and I've got Hilde and Sunniva back on the sat phone. And Hilde and Sunniva, we were just answering the question about, is there something you saw where you saw that climate change was having an impact on biodiversity or ecosystems, something that impacted you?
Yes, we'll both add a little bit to that pretty quickly so we don't get dropped off here. But floods, I live in Squamish, British Columbia, and floods, lots of rain, increased rainfall has been a huge impact for the west coast of Canada, and we see that even being a much bigger problem in the times to come. Of course, we get lots of rainfall anyway, but we're going to see more floods there, and I've been living in that. Penguin species, I have worked in the Antarctic for many, many years, and we've seen an increase in certain penguin species and a decrease in others, and also an increase in whether or not they're eating krill or other food sources. So the penguins are also adapting to climate change. And then the last thing that I'll share is phytoplankton, which we can't see, but maybe Jim already mentioned this, but it's that sort of flowery food source of water, which is a part of the main source of food in the marine food web. And we are collecting samples here of phytoplankton because they're wondering if, in fact, the fresh water melting in the Arctic impacts the production of phytoplankton. Fresh water coming into salt water is not a happy thing for phytoplankton. So we're studying whether or not they actually produce in the Arctic winter. And I'll pass you to Hilde for a couple of other things.
Yeah, well, we have seen the last 15 years here in the high Arctic that the temperature has risen, especially here on Svalbard, dramatically. And that makes difficulties for a lot of species. We see that we have less ice on the sea and we have more ice on land. And ice on land is not a good thing for the reindeers. And no sea ice is, as I mentioned, a problem for both what's happening in the ocean, and the ice is so important for everything happen underneath the ice. But it's also important for the seal and the breeding of the seals and the polar bears and food. So polar bears seem to, I don't know, maybe they are about to adapt and start to hunt on land, but it has been a dramatic change for them too. And so the temperature probably gives some winners, but we definitely see some big losers there of the temperature. And this has been a cold winter, so the weather has been cold this year, but the climate change is totally out of balance, and that's really scary. We had an avalanche in Longyearbyen in 2015, and that was one of the reasons why I really felt that this is, I mean, the place that I love, the power of nature that I love, it actually took away 12 of my neighbor houses, and 17 people were buried inside their houses, and 2 people died. And from that day, that really changed my life, and I really wanted to do something in order to make us all make a contribution for try to stop this climate change. So, and then I met Sunniva and we created Hearts in the Ice.
All right. Well, listen, we are getting close to the end of our connection for today, but I just shared a link via YouTube. So Jim shared a video with me, one of the Blue Realm videos with sea lions. It's about 40 minutes long, and it's, you know, a great thing for students to check out while you're at home and you need things to do and things to explore and things to see. So Jim, I shared the link with the students via YouTube. Can you tell us in maybe 30 seconds a little bit about what they can expect from this episode?
Well, if you have 3 dogs like we have, and you know how they're loving it all over you, just multiply that by 10 with sea lions. They either hate you or they love you. And if they love you, they're all over you. They're the most agile animal in the ocean. They're fun. They'll swim right up to you, blow bubbles in your face, chew on my flippers. My first encounter, I got bit across the shoulder in my wetsuit, and they dug out the rubber. They can be hazardous. You get in something like an elephant seal, which weighs 3,000 pounds, you get out of the water because they will bump into you and they will hurt you. So you got to remember, it's their ocean, their playground. We just visit. So you got to be careful with the ocean creatures.
All right, very cool. Well, Hilde and Sunniva, I'm glad we're able to get you in via satellite phone. I think it's an amazing example of just how isolated you are, how far, well, and that little buzzing sound means we just lost them. So hopefully we'll get a goodbye from Hilde and Sunniva if they can call back right away. But Jim and Corey, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. That was an awesome presentation. Thanks for sharing your expertise in diving, and Corey, of course, your expertise in biology. And thank you for those great images, those great stories. And I hope the students check out that episode of Blue Realm because, you know, lots of time to learn a little bit more, find something you're passionate about, and do a little research.
Well, we only have about 110 more episodes, so we're got lots of material.
All right. Lots to choose from. In fact, I've got Hilde and Sunniva again. Hilde and Sunniva, we're just wrapping up and thanking you for joining us today. And, you know, thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for joining us. It's a great example of how isolated you are, that it is so difficult to connect, but thanks for being with us today.
Oh, it's our pleasure. And I just want to mention something for everyone on the call. Just if they go to nrk.no and minute for minute, if they Google that, there is a 9-day around Svalbard slow TV, and we're on day number 8. And it's a great introduction to the biodiversity of species around Svalbard and what's happening up here. And there's a bunch of footage from us on day number 8. It's a pretty fascinating program they did.
All right, sounds good. Well, Hilde and Sunniva, stay warm, stay safe. Happy birthday. And we look forward to our next call on the 24th. All right. Excellent. Well, again, thank you so much. Anybody tuning in right now, if you stay on this channel at about 1 o'clock, we'll connect with the Mosaic Arctic Expedition with Jesse Creamin, who's a scientist who is researching ice and spent 3 months in the Arctic on an icebreaker, taking samples to learn more about global warming. So check that out. Jim and Corey, thank you so much. Yeah, we look forward to our next connection on the 24th.
Happy to be here.
All right. Thanks everyone for tuning in.